A very good evening to everyone present here tonight. My name is Brian and I will be your host for tonight. On behalf of the JPO family, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone tuning in for tonight's broadcast. We hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe indoors. A friendly reminder to maintain good hygiene at all times and maintain social distancing when heading out. As we'd like to continue improving your experience with us, please help us achieve this by completing the poll that will be broadcasted during this broadcast. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to type them out in the Q&A section down below. To anyone who is interested in sharing tonight's broadcast, a live feed is being shared on the JPO Facebook page and YouTube channel. A recording of the webinar will also be uploaded on these outlets. Tonight's seminar features Mr. Kevin A. Lefohn, with his topic being a career in teaching music online. As our JPO family attendees are mostly students ranging from primary school to college, their parents, and their teachers, the sharing of knowledge and advice he has for all of us is invaluable and greatly appreciated. The JPO is very honored to have Mr. Lefohn join in as our guest for tonight. I hope that you will all join me in giving him a warm welcome. Mr. Lefohn is a violinist whose international career as a recital soloist, chamber musician, and pedagogue has spanned to the US, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Japan, and Southeast Asia. Due to his numerous recital performances and chamber music collaborations, he has earned substantial international acclaim. The Flying Inkpot from Singapore has described him as a barnstorming violin exponent. Aside from his performances, Mr. Lefohn has also conducted various workshops and masterclasses in the aforementioned parts of the world. He has also held the position as a national recording artist for the Radio New Zealand concert and often performed live on Thursdays at 3, all classical Portland radio show. He currently performs with the Bodhi Trio as was shown in the video as we showed earlier. His career as a musician, which spans close to 30 years, has taken many steps, including studying with various musicians from both the University of Cincinnati College, Conservatory of Music, and the University of Oregon. He has also studied alongside the Emerson and Tokyo string quartets. Aside from his vast experience as a musician, he has also been sought after as a teacher and a judge, dedicating his time to the training of talented youths in string instruments. His students have earned various prizes in international competitions and have performed in various parts of the world. He has also served as a jury member for various international competitions, such as an international violin competition held in Sion, Valais, Switzerland, and he was also a member of the selection panel for the Michael Hill International Violin Competition. His career as an educator includes teaching positions at the University of Oregon. He has also taught at the University of Otago in New Zealand from 1998 to 2007, where he became the founding director of the famous Marama Strings Project. He has also served as founder and artistic director of the Queenstown Violin Summer School and Festival of Chamber Music held in New Zealand. He currently holds faculty teaching positions at the University of Portland and Pacific University in the US, where he also has a private studio. In this private studio, he conducts online video lessons internationally across 4 continents. As previously mentioned, he has also conducted frequent overseas trips for performances and masterclasses. He also founded an international online learning platform called Virtuosity Online, which allows musicians to grow connections among themselves while constantly feeding their own curiosities and interests in music. So without further ado, once again, a very good evening to you, Mr. Kevin A. Lefohn. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether to say good morning or good evening. It's early where I am.
Well, I think it's about what 6:10 a.m. where you are. So many thanks for joining us at such an early time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So to start tonight's interview, what can you tell us about the video that we were just watching?
This was a very special video to me, or performance to me. I have spent most of my career as a soloist and chamber musician, and this is the latest chamber music project I'm involved in called the Bodhi Trio, as you mentioned. And as a musician, we cherish the opportunities to play with musicians who we fall in love with their sound and we want to bring their sound into our sound and vice versa. And this was just a fabulous collaboration that started about 4 years ago. And I believe that was a recording from our first performance here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. And it's one that we were proud to get out into the world, but it's one that we've used as a foundation to grow from as an ensemble.
All right. Thanks for sharing that with us. That was a very interesting backstory to your current trio. So, what can you tell us a little about your current performing and teaching activities?
So I'm currently playing with the Bodhi Trio, as I said, is my main performance outlet. I also play recitals. I enjoy my summer festival performances and teaching. I teach and perform at the Interharmony International Music Festival in Italy every summer. Although this summer, of course, we're watching the world carefully. The festival is still on the calendar, but of course, watching to see if it is possible. I teach, as you mentioned, locally in the Portland, Oregon area in the U.S. at the University of Portland and Pacific University. And I have a thriving private studio, both here based in Portland, Oregon, but also for students online as well. As the world adapts to the circumstances where we are right now, I was recently invited to join the faculty of a new international all-year-round comprehensive online conservatory. And this is also organized by the Italian festival that I teach for and perform at, called the Interharmony International School of Music.
All right. So, around how many students are you handling, both locally and internationally?
During the school year, when the colleges are in session, my student load is between, depending on the year, probably about 28 to 40 students.
All right. So, how long have you been teaching music lessons online?
I've been teaching online for just over 10 years now.
All right. So, do you believe there are unique educational benefits to online music lessons?
I'm glad you asked. I do. The short answer is yes. The long answer I'll answer with a brief history of my background in online teaching. I was reminded the other day by a former teacher of mine back when I was a teenager, and she said, you were involved in distance learning from a very early age. She says, I remember when you used to send me cassette tapes. Many of our students today won't know what a cassette tape is. She said you would send me cassette tapes in the mail and of your playing, and I would then, by your request, you asked me to send tapes back to you with a lesson on that. And this was a teacher who was about 2 hours drive away. And I didn't remember that. So I obviously had an interest in learning online from a very early age. I'm sure encouraged by my parents to do so. And then fast forward many years, in about 2007, I was living in New Zealand and I had just moved to another city and I was wanting to keep connection with students while they were continuing their work. And I attempted to have a Skype lesson with a student, but it was a challenge, obviously, with internet speeds at where it was then and technology where it was, and we abandoned it. And so we would have telephone lessons when necessary, when we weren't able to go see each other. Then skip forward again to 2010, and I was invited by Professor Kurt Sossman's house, who is one of my former professors at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, to teach a new program for the Starling String Project, which was offering Skype lessons. And we started doing this, and it was an early, or very early program, pioneer in online teaching. And we taught by Skype individual lessons to students from around the world. And it was my first experience in doing this. And I was very pleased that the technology had caught up and it was very successful. Most of these students were students who didn't have access to teachers at their level in the area that they were in. So I would have students from all over the world. I had students from Bolivia, India, Europe, and across the US and South America. And it was just a fascinating experience to have to manage all these time zones in my calendar. But to this day, one of those students that I worked with at that time from Europe is still a student of mine. She's now 17 years old and began working with me when she was quite young as a beginner, and she's now a very advanced student. So I see the greatest access, I had seen the greatest access, the greatest benefit of online teaching was access to teachers who weren't possible in their area. There was a lot of skepticism, there has been over years, of the value of online teaching. From my own experience and my students' experience, we knew that it was deeply valuable. These were students who were making progress that wouldn't have been able to make progress because they didn't have a teacher in their community. So I've always been aware of the benefits, and it wasn't until now, where everyone is literally forced to learn online and to teach online, that the rest of the world sees the value in it.
We definitely have gone a long way from cassette tapes, so yeah, that's definitely something. So what challenges do you experience with online music lessons, other than the ones that you have already mentioned, like the skepticism and such?
I'll be very interested to see if in even 3 years, how many of the challenges we see now no longer exist and which ones still exist. And I think it is over just a matter of time that as technology catches up, we're going to be able to merge a real world with a virtual world in terms of learning platforms. Having said that, some of the challenges that we experience now, and this is, everybody who, like the conversation we're having, everybody who's having online dialogue realizes that it's asynchronous and that you speak, I speak, you speak, I speak, and there's this delay that we have. And it means that we cannot have a fully interactive experience as two human beings communicating at the same time. For two people to be in the same room and to interrupt each other and to feed off on the energy that one gives to the other is something that's so naturally human and so essential in our processing of information, our learning, but also our emotional response to that experience. And that is stilted in the online learning environment. So you have to compensate for that, and you have to adapt to that. With that comes the inability to play together. And that video that we just saw, what was so enjoyable about that for me personally and for my colleagues was that live in-time interaction that we're having. And the cumulative effect of that is what the audience receives. So that's the difficulty that we have with online learning. Having said that, there are so many benefits that come with that experience that they certainly more than balance out. You just have to adapt and accommodate accordingly.
Hopefully the technology does come where everything does improve much better. So how have you used this period of COVID-19 to further invest in music, online music learning? Sorry.
By not sleeping. I realized, so I'll tell this as a story. I realized, so for us in Portland, Oregon, it was the week of March 12th that we began to shut down and not be able to go in groups, in congregating groups. And that coincided with a monthly performance class, a master class that I have for my private studio. And this is a class where my 15 or so private students come together, and when they're ready, they're assigned to perform, and they perform for each other. They give feedback for each other's performances. They challenge each other. They feel supported, and it's not a showcase on me as much as it's an opportunity for them to come together and to support each other. And it's a highly valuable, educationally, a highly valuable experience for my students. And for me, it becomes a culmination of their work in their practice on a monthly basis. It holds them accountable because they're performing live, which is what we're training ourselves to do. And I have that same environment on a regular basis at each of my universities where I teach. And I've always wanted to bring them together, and I've always felt that my online students were out in the world doing what they do, but not able to interact and benefit my other students. But I had attempted at times to have a big performance class and invite my college students, but they could never come, and it was geographical distance between. So finally, I had an opportunity, and I said to all of my students, I said, I've never done this before, but I want to teach an online group class, and we're going to have a performance class. And it may be a failure, but let's just try this and see what happens. So I scheduled a Zoom session, and I had 25 students there. And it turned out to be the most marvelous and energizing experience. And I thought, okay, here I have 12-year-olds performing beautifully and at a very high level, and I have college students who aren't as advanced. Wow. And I have college students who are very mature musicians, very advanced students who are inspiring younger students as well. And that was such a benefit that I realized that this needed to be expanded. Well, at that time, I was teaching, I had switched to teaching all my students near and far online. And I knew how to do that. I'd done that forever, and I just sent out an email. I said, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. And I didn't need to put any energy into it apart from supporting any questions they had. Well, my colleagues around the world were trying to figure out, how do we do this? Some had online teaching, some hadn't. And I was reaching out and supporting as many as I could. And I had extra energy and time to put into creating an online learning platform in group sessions. And I went into a pilot test phase for 2 months of inviting students from around the world to join weekly performance classes and technique classes for free initially, and because I wanted to test it. And then I started inviting colleagues to teach some of these classes, and I hosted it. And the result of that is we would have at times more than 60 students from around the world coming together, and we would have 5 or 6 of them perform. Or we would do a special technique class on bow strokes or on intonation. And it was really, really beneficial. And we began to test this and use it more and more, and to see if this was something that people would pay a small amount of money for. And I then hired a brand consultant and graphic designer and web designer, and on May 2nd launched Virtuosity.online. And it is a platform that offers not private lessons. I always make that really clear, that this is an environment and a platform that supports teachers and students in between their private lessons. And we offer, I'll talk about it later if you want, but we offer classes that are available internationally. And they are, again, they're taught, the most interesting thing is they're taught by professional musicians and university professors. And just this week we have 13 classes, and I'm only teaching one of them.
All right. Well, thanks for letting us all know all that. Before we carry on forward, I would just like to remind our attendees that to leave, if you have any questions that you'd like to leave for Mr. Lefohn, please type them out in the Q&A section down below. Or for those of you on YouTube or Facebook, please just please type them out in the comment section. So moving on. So what can you please tell us more about this Virtuosity Online that you've been working on? Because it definitely sounds that you've been putting a lot of work, effort into it, and there's a lot of support into it as well.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It has been my life, every living and probably sleeping and waking moment of the past, since March, since the concept emerged. It started with me doing searches for domain names and trying to find one that really suited what I was looking to do. And the whole idea stems from the idea of curiosity And one of my students, who's a teenager, um, inspired me to do this. And she didn't ask me to do this, but what was happening is she would come to her lessons and she would tell me about a YouTube video that she watched, or a master class that she watched, or a recording that she saw, or a conversation that she was part of online. And it really made our lessons enjoyable. It challenged me as a teacher. It made me think about things that we had talked about and she was hearing, to support that, or ideas that were in conflict with things that we'd talked about. And I appreciated that. I really enjoyed the opportunity to help her learn, help her find her place in the world as a musician, and chart her path forward from the experiences she was having in between her violin lessons with me. And I always thought, what a wonderful opportunity this is to be a teacher now, if we embrace that opportunity and to put aside any sense of ownership or ego involved in that student's education. Because in essence, we only see a student as a teacher 1 hour usually a week. That means if you count up all those other hours they're spending learning and absorbing information, we're a very minor part of the information that comes into their mind. The rest of that time has to be based on their own interest and their curiosity to learn. And I started thinking more about that, inspired by this student, that what does curiosity do for us? Well, it asks us to seek answers. We are looking to grow our experience, grow our information that we have, our knowledge, and therefore our skill. And if I could be part of feeding that curiosity with something, with some kind of learning program or platform, then there's a whole package that that student is involved in. And I always wanted to create an opportunity where it was accessible financially, it was accessible geographically, and create something that had minimal barriers. And in this case, Virtuosity.online has only one barrier, and that's access to the internet. So what it is it's a series of curated classes presented by university professors and professional musicians. We offer technique classes. We offer interpretation classes. One of your previous interviewees is Professor Dr. Andrew Filmer from Sunway University. And he is one of our teachers on Virtuosity.online. He teaches a weekly interpretation class for us. It's a fantastic lecture-style class. We have classes on how to practice, learning how to practice with more efficiency. That's presented by a professional guitarist from Los Angeles named Greg Goodhart. And he brings the neuroscience of how the brain learns to the practice room. And it's a mini lecture followed by an interactive masterclass style class. And so students will participate, but students will also observe. We have master classes. Just this coming weekend, we have a performance, a live performance, and master class on Bach solo cello suites played on viola by a very eminent professor, Csaba Ederle. So we have these kinds of very high-level professors and performers presenting their interest, their craft from their own homes, and that's the beauty of the time we have right now. Each of our classes is, we say, a la carte. You can purchase any class that you want, that interests you and that the time suits you. Up until just this week, we've had a barrier where people had to be available at the time of the class. It's been very important for me that they are live classes, they are interactive. But just this week, we announced that the majority of our classes are now available to register to receive a video of the class. So we're just doing that now. We've seen an influx of a lot of registrations this week from around the world. It always delights me when I get a notification on my phone and I see where the student is coming from. This morning I had one come from Switzerland, and then within an hour after that, I had one come from Hungary. The interesting thing, our students range all the way from as young as 8 years old to through adults. 60% of our students for some of our classes, our technique classes especially, have been teachers themselves. So we're seeing that teachers are attending these classes and taking the classes for professional development. It's been a real joy to put it together. For me, it's been professional development because I love interacting with my colleagues. I have 13 teachers right now that I'm interacting with who are presenting these classes, and I sit in every class and I observe and I absorb, and it's affected my own teaching as well.
Well, it's glad to see that the lack of sleep from from handling all this hasn't affected your enthusiasm of this project that you've been working on. So yeah, it definitely sounds like a very interesting program with so many people coming in to support it as well. So yeah, that's great to hear. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing all that with us, Mr. Lefohn.
Thank you.
So moving on. So as you have, based on your own extensive experience with conducting master classes for young musicians, including as you mentioned your own online learning platform, what can you suggest for the JPO so that we may improve our training sessions for our own members?
I'm glad you asked. One of the things that I appreciate the opportunity to do is to work with orchestras, community orchestras, and music education programs around the world, sometimes in my own performance or teaching, but very often in conversations like this. The slide that you have revolving right now with me performing with young students is from an El Sistema program here in Portland, Oregon called Bravo Youth Orchestras. And I was involved with them as an advisor for the first 5 years when they were starting out. And as much as I wish I had time to invest to my own performance or teaching with organizations, I know that having conversations and talking about the world of music and the world of music education is something simply in itself is hopefully helpful. Along the lines of how I may be able to help, I think simply comes from my own experience of watching the world in music education change during this time. And we say that with a bit of dread, but I have looked at it as much as possible with opportunity and to see, well, what has changed around us. And now that it's like throwing everything up in the air. And we want to control where everything lands, but we can't because we don't know when or how it will land. And so we're in this time of suspended animation. And if you notice, the part of the logo of Virtuosity.online is a fermata. And as musicians know, what the fermata means is to pause. And it feels like that right now in the world, that we are pausing. We are waiting for something to happen. But while we're waiting for something to happen, we're creative. And we're positive, and we're changing the world around us so that when things begin to land and settle again, we can decide where those things fall. And what we see happening is that there is no stigma any longer about online teaching, that it is for any reason any less effective. It is unique and it is different, but that gives us now an opportunity because everyone is learning online. Students are learning new skills. They're learning quicker than ever. Teachers are becoming better teachers. So we have students who are becoming more personally motivated to learn because they have to work harder to get to it. We see teachers who are being more creative in their teaching. We're evolving our work and behaviors faster as a human race more than ever in a similar period of time. So this openness to change presents really, in my thought, a monumental opportunity for organizations like JPO to embrace the moment and to do things differently. This series of interviews is a prime example of that. We have people listening today who are here listening because why? Because they're at home. They may not normally have been at home. That means that they're investing time in thinking about things perhaps differently. They have time to do that. So ideas, in general, my advice to organizations and to teachers and students is to be flexible, be creative, and adapt. Change around you, drop old ways of doing things, because if you don't, life becomes a little bit dark and a little bit quiet and a little bit concerning. We see youth orchestras, and I'm sure you have either done this or are considering doing it, doing the click track recordings. And we did that in the, what these are is the recordings where an orchestra presents a video of all of their musicians performing together. And they all are wearing headphones in the video, and it's this montage, it's collage of performers. And have you guys done this yet at JPO?
Not that I'm aware of, but yeah, I think that will definitely be something that I think teacher uplink and the rest of the JPO can organize in the near future, hopefully. So yeah.
I'll warn you, it is heavily involved in the back end of things. The benefit for students, so the way it works is you have the conductor decides on a piece of repertoire, keeping it short for the first time, keeping it tempo steady. They record a click track that students would listen to, and students learn how to play their music listening to the click track. The click track is, for those students who may not be aware of it, is a recording with a click, and the conductor will say, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the click starts. Click, 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 click. Letter A. Click, 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 and the conductor provides a click track. The students learn how to do this. It becomes a great learning tool in itself for students to have to be completely responsible for their own rhythm. Then they submit their video of them playing this with the click track in their ears to the conductor or to the administrators. And then somebody who is the maestro, this is where the art comes in, then takes, whether there's 65 or 70 or 100 recordings together, and manipulates those and lines those up so that they all come together as a performance. We did this with my youth orchestra here in Portland, in Oregon. I conduct an orchestra of 11 to 15-year-old musicians, and the music director of the ensemble of the organization was the maestro behind the scenes doing all of this work. And it was very successful. It worked very well. Great learning opportunity for the students. Very different experience because we're not able to make music together. That's one suggestion I have. Another would be seeking opportunities for older students and more advanced students to be mentors for younger students. This can be done very easily online. And for instance, in a click track recording project, we can have older students helping younger students in individual one-to-one sessions as they're learning their click track part. And I love the idea of having students mentor other students. It's an educational experience for both to do that, and also helps connect people right now. It's so important to find these connections, even if it is, especially if it's one-on-one. Having parent support sessions. How do we keep students motivated? How do we keep them working during this time? Parents, they are parenting in very different ways right now. Parents are stressed. Parents are having to become teachers of their students. This is something that many parents are not used to. Parents are always teachers, but formal education teachers, this is difficult. Reaching out to parents and helping them so that they can help their students. My kind of final thing is about helping students and families not be isolated or not feel isolated. We're all isolated right now, but reaching out to parents and to students and to those who may have dropped off your radar, those who you're not hearing from, those who you're not seeing logging into these sessions, to find out how they're doing. That can be difficult, especially without internet access. So engage, don't isolate.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that first. Teacher Uplink has even Teacher Uplink even pointed something out in the chat. So regarding a click track concept that you were mentioning, apparently Adi, our screen sharer, has actually been doing that. So yeah, that's something I didn't know. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so I think with that we'll move on to our Q&A section. So we've received quite a few questions in the chat, as I think you've noticed.
Yes.
So our first one comes from Adi as well. So Adi is asking, hello, Mr. Kevin. So between teaching online and face-to-face teaching, which of these two have achieved better results?
That's a great question. And I can answer that now differently than I might have answered it before COVID-19 world. And if I go back to my student who is now 17 and she's been working with me from Europe for now, well, that would have been about 8 or 9 years in total. She began with me when she'd been playing for less than a year, at age 8 or 9. I can't remember exactly now. She's now 17, and she's playing solo Bach. She's playing Wieniawski. She's playing at a very advanced level and competing. She's achieved remarkable results. Now, she's an interesting case because her father is a violinist and has been able to help her and nurture her along the way. But she's had a trajectory which has been really very much on par with a student who would have studied with me during that same time in a face-to-face, in the same room environment. For a student like her, she has somebody who's able to play for her and with her, so that is an augmentation to that experience for her. The greatest disadvantage of online teaching is that my students hear me, but they don't hear me while they're playing, and there is something that happens in our ears, in our minds, that changes when we're responding with somebody else's sound. So I have had the experience on 3 occasions to meet students and to hear and to work with students who I first began working with online and then worked with them in person. This was when I went to my first time teaching at the Interharmony International Festival of Music in Italy, and 3 of my students who I had worked with as online students came to study with me there. Fascinating experience because I didn't expect this, but we were both very nervous to meet each other. And I did not expect it at all. It was strange because you have a sense of what somebody looks like, but then when you see them standing, they're taller or shorter or different than you would imagine. And I also was a little nervous to hear how they would sound in the same room, but very pleasantly surprised that I was not disappointed in that way. So I don't find that there is a better result one way or another, primarily because the bulk of my teaching is not all, but is focused very much so on technical development. And that can be done very easily and effectively online.
All right. Thanks for that. So, we'll now move on to another question from Adi. So he's asking, because as you've mentioned, you have students coming from all around the world coming to you. So did you face any language barriers when you were teaching?
All the time. All the time. I would be foolish if I said I didn't. And it has made me a better teacher. The less we speak as a teacher, the more we play, the more we listen. And when you can't communicate verbally in a common language, then those skills become that much more important and heightened. So yes, there is a barrier there, but it has only made my teaching better and probably more humorous at times.
All right. So moving on to our next question. So this is coming from an anonymous person. So they're asking. So they're saying, "Hi, Mr. Lefohn. Do you need to invest a lot in setting up before you can teach online?"
In terms of investment of technology and the cost, no. I did most of my online teaching with just a laptop. I have a Apple MacBook Pro, and that was very suitable. At some point, I invested in a larger monitor, and then that was my online setup for years, for quite a long time. I just, with Virtuosity.online, wanted to upgrade, and so I bought a very inexpensive USB mic. It was $40 US. and then a new webcam, which was $80 US. So relatively speaking, the investment is not that much. There's obviously a monthly cost for internet services, and I know in my experience in teaching students in Malaysia that and in Europe also that the internet consistency can be an issue at times, and so that one we can't always control.
But yeah, it's great to hear that on the hardware side of things, it's not too expensive to change. You don't need to invest in an too expensive setup. So yeah, it's great to hear that.
And many of my students use their phones on their end, and I laugh at that because I know that I'm only this big on their end, but it seems to work for them. The trouble at times is that I'll ask them to change the angle so I can see a certain aspect of their technique, but it works for them.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Mr. Lefohn. So this is coming from, so our next question is it possible for you to teach students online from countries where, like, this is what we were just talking about, where countries that have slow internet speed? Is it possible to have lessons with these students?
That's a great question. Yes, it is possible. If it becomes impossible, then you can do an exchange of videos. I prefer not to do that because I myself as a teacher thrive on having, even if it is stilted, this live interaction that we have, and you can adjust to that stiltedness. What I do with my online students is I'll have them do a broadband speed test. And for students or parents or teachers who haven't done this, you just go to a browser search to Google and you type broadband speed test and you hit go or test, and it'll give you your upload and your download speed. And this is not to be confused with Wi-Fi speed in your house, but it is the speed of the internet transfer of information to your house, to your device, and away, the download and upload speed. And that is dependent on the level of service that you pay with your provider and the traffic and the consistency of that service. So I will then have them send me the results, and I know that anything under 5 megabits per second is going to be a little bit troublesome. Although the time of day changes, and I have taught many students from Malaysia, and we knew that certain times of day at the time we were teaching them were more difficult. That has improved over time as service providers invest in their technology and the services they're providing. When things are difficult, we'll change mediums or change software that we use. It'll either be Skype or Zoom is my go-to one now, FaceTime for Apple devices, Google Hangouts. Some are better at other times for different people. The quality is always dependent on the broadband, the internet connection that you have on your end and the student's end.
I don't know. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, it definitely heavily depends on traffic speed as well. So yeah, that's definitely understandable there. So moving on. So let's see, what's our next? So we have another question from the chat. So our next question is also from an anonymous person. So he's asking, online class has become such a norm nowadays. Will it impact students that go for live performances? Like, will it affect them, like in terms of like stage fright and other such occurrences?
That's a fantastic question, and has been a question in my mind ever since March when I started doing this. And I asked a big group of students, so one of these 40 or 50 or 60 student classes that I had, to talk about that. And in our online classes, we have, just like we do on a Zoom session, and all our classes are on Zoom, so we have chat feature. And all of our students are promoted to panelists, so they're not anonymous. We can see them, we can hear them when they are speaking. And we had a conversation with the performers of that class that day, of which there were, I think we had 8 performers that day. how did it feel to them to perform online compared to performing in person in relation to their stage fright or performance anxiety. And I assumed at the time that they would feel more comfortable playing online. I thought, well, I would feel more comfortable playing online. And the predominant response was there was no difference. They felt the same. They were still nervous playing online. So I don't know. I suspect that I think we get comfortable with the environment we're in at any given time. The more experience we have performing on stage, the more comfortable we feel performing there. The more experience we have playing online, the more comfortable we get there. The difference is that when we make the change, then that is the new thing, is the foreign thing. We're nervous, we're less comfortable about it. So I suspect that as we transition from performers and learners online back to performing in real warm live spaces, that of course we're going to be a little bit anxious. But I would hope and speculate that the excitement and the sheer joy we have from making music on a stage with live people around us will be probably overwhelming, but we'll take care of any worries that we have.
Uh, Thanks for that. Thanks for that sharing that viewpoint with us. So moving on. So we have another person saying, after the pandemic ends, do you think that online music classes will continue to further develop?
I do. Um, I think there will be a big shift in the because we've had to, as I said before, had to adapt and be creative and be more independent in our consumption of information. No longer are we kids going to school and being provided with an education. They're sitting at home and having to go get their education. And I believe that is probably a life-changing behavioral shift. And I think it's a positive one. And the education providers will continue to take that as an opportunity, knowing that they may not have to work as hard to deliver to students, because students are coming to them now wanting to be inspired, to be educated. There will be a lot of competition for providing those resources. I think that because now the stigma is gone, it's erased, I think we've opened the floodgates in a very, very positive way.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah, definitely will be interesting to see what happens like once the pandemic does end and see how online learning further what direction online learning heads in. So yeah. So this is another question coming from someone. Do you have any advice or tips that you can provide with regards to improving teaching online? So I'm assuming this is someone that is teaching online.
I'd happy to, yes, definitely. Um, First of all, if teachers have access to online forums, these are terrific environments for, Facebook has many groups that are set up for distant learning and teaching. And there's just such a treasure trove of information there with people sharing their own experiences and ideas and resources and opportunities. First of all, that's that one. Second of all, I realized early on that we needed to find a way to optimize the sound on Zoom, which is the one that I use predominantly. And so there are some settings. If students and teachers are using Zoom, there are settings to optimize the audio there. And so I have a YouTube video that I did to help that. It makes a tremendous difference. The problem is that Zoom tries to make all the audio optimized for speaking. It's set up as a conference software. And so you can change some of those algorithms to go away and get rid of some of the processing that happens, which helps a lot. That's a technology-based one. I find that it's incredibly important to keep the communication up with my students in between lessons and keep myself focused as a teacher on my strategy, where I'm going with a student. And so the tools that I've used for myself is first of all, I record every lesson and I send my students a copy of that recording so that they can review that. And it gives them a chance to watch and listen to themselves as well. I have a Google Doc that I share with each of my students, which is independent to each of them, and that I take notes after the lesson. One of the questions earlier was, is there considerable investment in teaching online? There's more investment of time. It takes me longer after every lesson to type up notes. And that's incredibly important because then when I have the next lesson with that student, I go to that Google Doc and I remember what we did, what the assignment was, and then know that they have been following that throughout the week. The other thing I do with my online students is I ask them to document their practice. And so I have a practice log, a journal. And it's just a Google Doc, and they just put Monday I practiced my scales for this long, and I practiced my Bach for this long, and I practiced my concerto for this long, and I have them send a screenshot of that to me prior to their lesson, and then we talk about the practice for the week, not in terms of how long did you practice, but how they felt about their practice and the kinds of things they learned and were inspired in their own time. But I also see how much time they've been putting in. That's been invaluable during this time, with both keeping them on track in terms of their own week-to-week progress, but also how they manage their time in a very kind of unpredictable time right now.
And that way of like keeping track of their progress definitely sounds like a very interesting concept, because it does provide them with the opportunity to self-reflect on their learning as well. So yeah, that's definitely something that would be interesting. Thank you for that. So I think we'll move on to our last question for tonight. So this, I'm not sure if it's from Teacher Upling or if it's from an anonymous person, but this person is saying, aside from motivating students, what motivates or drives you to keep teaching?
I love that you asked that question, or that a listener asked that question. If I've noticed in myself, if I stagnate, if I am no longer thinking about new things, if I'm no longer trying to produce a more beautiful sound in my playing, then I get bored. And with boredom comes, you lose energy. And what I find as I mentioned earlier, when I collaborate with colleagues and I'm learning from them, but when my students are coming to me with questions, and perhaps questions that I can't answer right away, then I'm curious. Then I'm seeking new information and new knowledge. That inspires me, and that motivates me, and it keeps me moving. This is, I said to somebody recently that this COVID-19 era has been one of tremendous growth for me personally, perhaps self-inflicted, but it means that I've been living in this bubble that I created, which is this bubble of curiosity, which means that I haven't been fully aware of the world around us, which is very challenging right now, and very different and scary, and unmotivating in that way. And I realized that I needed to create that bubble for myself, but involve as many as I could in that, so that we don't stagnate, and that we don't become depressed or about the world and the world's circumstances. And while it is very serious and we have to take it seriously, we have to, as the saying goes, you have to make lemonade out of lemons.
Fair enough. Yeah, we just have to work out how things go from what we get. So yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. So once again, I think that this will be where we end off our program. So thank you so much for your answers tonight. So once again, sorry everyone, but we are coming to the end of tonight's program. We would like to remind everyone that our JPO Family Program will be broadcasted twice a week until further notice. So join us next time with our next guest, who's a Malaysian-based trombonist all the way from Finland. More details on this can be found on our Facebook page. a video recording of tonight's broadcast will be available on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. This will be alongside other our past webinars and the soon-to-be broadcasted interviews. So please feel free to share either the Zoom registration link, the JPO Facebook page, or the YouTube channel with your friends and family. You guys have been an amazing audience. So we from the JPO family wishes that everyone stays safe and healthy as we continue to face this crisis together. So I will now be leading a prayer to end tonight's program. Please pray in whatever faith you believe in regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We pray that everyone in the world continues to stay strong in making it through these difficult times and that a solution to the virus will soon be found. We pray for everyone's well-being as we draw closer to the end of June. We pray for the safety and well-being of the people working again. We pray for the continued safety and morale of the frontliners who are risking their lives so that they may continue to provide for those in need. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Lefohn, for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you join us tonight. So once again, good night, and we hope to see you all again next time.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you. No.
No?